We're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to look at one verse and just part of it. Verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And may the Lord bless the reading of his word. Well, the beginning has a backstory. Just like our Sunday school lesson, when we were actually before that, when we did the summary of the book, it said it had a backstory for the book of Philemon. Well, there's a backstory to Genesis and creation. It's written in creation, in all the things that we see and the things we cannot see. Paul describes it this way in Romans chapter 1, verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So where is it that we see God in the things that he has made? We see God, first of all, in that there is a plan. See, a plan comes from a mind, from intelligence, from a source. There is a plan. We see his meticulous design behind every part of creation, including matter, the basic elements that have mass or volume, and substances like energy and light and photons and subatomic particles, which do not have mass or volume, but they exist. Then add to these things like thoughts and feelings and information, which don't have physical properties. And with these elements and a divine plan, it all came together like this. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God called the light day and the darkness night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from waters. And God called the dry land earth, and gathered together the waters, called he seas. God saw that it was good. God said, let the earth bring forth grass, herb, yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And so it was. And God said, let there be light, light in the firmament and the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. And so it was. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he also made stars. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundant moving creatures that have life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after his kind, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the fowl of the air and the cattle, and over all the earth, and over all creeping things that creep upon the earth. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. God made man. God created man, though, in an instant. God spoke man into existence. Of course, the scoffers will say, what do you mean God spoke man into existence? You see, science tells us it took billions of years and innumerable random accidental events flowing out of utter chaos. They say the result of all these accidents was the creation of the universe. Now, how probable is it that random events taking place in chaos produced not only the world, but an alphabet, all the rules of grammar, the dictionary, and the English language, and the physical universe? And we are only beginning to understand how complex God's creation is at its very basic parts, how intricate in detail it is. With microscopes, we have begun to probe the complexity of what God created. Someone described it this way. with modern microscopes, we can see what we cannot see. And without these microscopes, cell theory would not have been possible. Now, we thought cells were small. Then we discovered that cells have smaller components. Then we discovered that there were even smaller building blocks called atoms. That word atom is interesting. It's from the ancient Greek adjective atmos, meaning uncuttable or indivisible, meaning it's as small as it gets. The earliest concepts of the nature of the atom were debated in India and in ancient Greece. But now we know that the atom has a nucleus composed of protons and neutrons surrounded by a cloud of electrons. And we call these subatomic particles. There are now 12 fundamental subatomic particles. Up quarks, down quarks, strange quarks, charm quarks, top quarks, bottom quarks, electrons, electron neutrons, muons, muon neutrinos, tau, and tau neutrinos. Aren't you glad you know that? The particles make up matter and mass. There are other additional particles called photons, W and Z bosons, and gluons. And in the current understanding of particle physics, quarks are considered to be fundamental particles, meaning they are not composed of smaller particles. That's what we thought when we first saw an atom. That wasn't all there was it? We thought cells and atoms didn't get any smaller. So scientists are continuously searching for evidence of particles smaller than quarks, using powerful accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC as it is called, can probe structures at an incredibly small scale. But so far, they haven't found evidence of anything smaller than quarks. However, the preons theory presupposes that quarks are made up of even smaller particles than preons. Then there's the miracle within the cells called DNA. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick achieved what appeared impossible. They discovered the genetic structure deep inside the nucleus of our cells. And we call this genetic material DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. The discovery of DNA's double helix structure opened the floodgates for scientists to examine the code embedded within the DNA. And now, more than half a century after that initial discovery, the DNA code has been deciphered, although many of the elements are still not understood. As scientists began to decode the human DNA molecule, they found something quite unexpected. They found an exquisite language composed of some 3 billion genetic letters. Along with the letters, there are rules, just like in the English language, rules about spelling, about the parts of speech. It's taking you back to English class. Nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives. Sentence structure. Do you remember diagramming sentences? I don't think I ever really understood that. Word definitions and how the context of words may change their meaning. The language of creation is what God spoke. And Genesis says, and God said, let there be, and there was. That's how Genesis states it. But behind those words, what was created? The language itself about that creation. Sounds simple, but behind that language there is God. And it's all man can do to master a 24-letter alphabet and the English syntax and grammar that goes along with it. What if in school we had to learn an alphabet of 3 billion letters and take spelling tests on all the words that they form and learn the rules of grammar to properly arrange the words in a sentence, the proper meaning of the words, and how the context of the words might be influenced by how they're ordered? You know, it's hard for us to fathom, but the amount of information in human DNA is roughly equivalent to 12 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. This is just the information in human DNA. An incredible 384 volumes worth of detailed information that would fill 48 feet of library shelves if you have an alphabet of 3,000 letters. Imagine how many words and sentences you can make. And yet, their actual size, which is only 2 millionths of a millimeter thick, a teaspoon of DNA, according to molecular biologist Michael Denton, could contain all the information needed to build proteins in all of the species of organisms that have ever lived on Earth, with enough room left for all the information in every book that has ever been written, in a teaspoon of DNA. Who or what could miniaturize such information and place this enormous number of letters in their proper sequence as a genetic instruction manual? Could evolution have gradually come up with a system like this? Genesis says, in the beginning, God. For it to be rightly called a language, it would have to contain an alphabet and a coding system, correct spelling, grammar, proper arrangement of words, meanings, semantics, and the intended purpose. Even Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, had to admit DNA is like a software program, only much more complex than anything we've ever devised. Can you imagine something more intricate than the most complex program running on a supercomputer? Something like the language of DNA, and DNA itself being created by accident through evolution? No matter how much time, no matter how many mutations, no matter how much natural selections were put into the account. The language of Genesis comes alive as we imagine God as he speaks. Let there be. And so the elements of matter, the laws that govern their bonds and actions, the language of DNA is formed, letters, words, sentences, grammar, meaning, and matter. God spoke the universe, and the universe was transcribing the words into existence. Light, the sky, the land, the sea, the moon, the stars, sea creatures, birds, land animals, and finally man himself. See, DNA language is not just a language in itself. It has to do about the information that it carries. It's kind of like the Bible itself. It's not just a book with words and stuff. It's the message that it carries. DNA is a book like Homer's Iliad. It contains information, but the physical book itself is not information. The materials in the book, the paper, the ink, the glue, contain the contents, but they're only a means of transporting the information that could only originate from an intelligent source that wrote that book. Inside every man is the written language of God, not just a book and a language, but the information and God himself. As Lee Strobel explained it, the data at the core of life is not disorganized. It's not simple like salt crystals, but it's complex and specific information that can accomplish a bewildering task, the building biological machines that far outstrips human technology and its capabilities. It's precise. Language of creation is exactly precise. Psalm 33 describes it this way: by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by by the breath of his mouth. He gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. He layeth up this deep storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. You see, the point is that everything that exists is planned by God. Everything is part of God's plan. If you look closely enough at a strand of DNA, you'll find the entire plan for your body. Buried within that very verse of the Bible is the DNA of God's plan. In the beginning, God created. The language of creation begins to flow. God speaks, let there be, not just words, but the words became substance and light and earth and sea, vegetation, sun, moon, stars, sea creatures, birds, land animals, and finally humans. And in the language of creation, God spoke the world into being. I like how the psalmist describes it. He says, for you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I give thanks to you, for I am fearfully, which means awesomely and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knoweth it very well. You know, deep down inside, we know that we're not accidents, and we're not simple. Created by God. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my uniform substance, and in your book were all written, the days that were ordained for me, and when as yet there was not one of them. He knew us before we were even created, and he loves us, and he created us. Everybody is planned by God, even in the very smallest detail, beyond anything that the eye can see. You are not an accident. God has a plan for you and me. He does go on in chapter 2. You can read that when you get home, and it'll tell you a little bit more about the creation. But the point here is that he is present and personally involved in our lives. God didn't just create us to leave us. He didn't shove us out the door and leave us to fend for ourselves and forget about us. Psalm 139 describes the relationship between God and every man, woman, and child ever created. It says, O Lord, thou hast searched me. You know that God is looking on you and me. He's searching us. And he has known me. He knows you. Matter of fact, he knows you better than you know yourself. Better than I know myself. Thou knowest my down sitting and my uprising. I like that. I like that phrase. Or as the Fairfield 4 quartet talked about it, my down sitting and my uprising. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off. Thou compassest, you scrutinize, you're looking at my path. You're seeing where I'm going. And you're seeing my lying down. When I'm awake or when I'm asleep, that's what that means. And art intimately acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word found on my tongue, but lo, Lord, you knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before. You were before. And you're going to be after too. And you've laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high. I cannot fully grasp it. I can't attain it. So the God who created your body also created your soul. He has searched you. He knows you. He knows you're down sitting and you're uprising. That means that God is aware of your entire life, every action, every movement, every thought, whether consciously or unconsciously formed. Nothing in your life is hidden from God, who sees and understands everything. The psalmist uses these words to express his unwavering faith and reliance on God's omnipresence. He's everywhere. And intimate knowledge of each one of us. He is saying that every aspect of our life, from the moment of rest and stillness, my down sitting, to the times of activity, my uprising, they're all known to an understanding and a loving God. So where is your faith and your reliance on the God who created you? How do you know him? Do you know him? Where is he in your planning? And do you consult him? And do you obey him? Lord, the truth is you know us better than we know ourselves. And your plan for us is far better than anything we could plan for ourselves. So help us to turn our lives completely over to you.